Köszöntöm a nézőket, Endrei Mátyás vagyok, a Partizán szerkesztője. A gázai háború egyre több civil áldozatot követel, és ezzel párhuzamosan egyre több nemzetközi szervezet van, amelyik kimondja, népirtás zajlik az övezetben. Az Orvosok Határok Nélkül az egyik ilyen szervezet, amely már 2024. december óta arról beszél, Izrael népirtást végez az övezet lakói között, néhány napja pedig arról is részletes jelentést tettek közé, hogy az élelmiszerosztópontok hogyan szolgálnak valójában csapdaként, ahol tizededik a lakosságot. A Partizánnak lehetősége nyílt beszélni az Orvosok Határok Nélkül jelenleg is Gázavárosban tartózkodó projektkoordinátorával, Willemennel személyes tapasztalataikról, és arról, miért érzik úgy, hogy a tapasztalataik alapján kijelenthetik, hogy népirtás és hogy szándékos népirtás zajlik. Most ezt az interjút láthatjátok, a felvétel augusztus 12-én készül.
We have a range of activities across the Gaza Strip. Of course, all of them health related, some of them related also to water and sanitation, mainly water trucking. Both support to actual field hospitals or existing hospitals, as well as more primary healthcare centers. Then I can explain to you what I do in the project that I run here in Gaza City, where we have four key components. One is water trucking. So we distribute drinking water for people in 30 different points around Gaza City. Obviously, it's always relevant, but especially in summer months, it's very needed. Today is reportedly the hottest day since 1942. So you can imagine, for people who live in tents and who don't have access to running water, like the vast majority of people in Gaza City, this is key every day, but especially on a day like today. Then we run a primary healthcare center here in the city. General medical consultations, people who have non-communicable diseases, so chronic diseases like diabetes, etc. We have wound care nurses there, a physiotherapist, a mental health team, a team of midwives, and very importantly, also a malnutrition program. So we have now in this malnutrition program 5 times more patients than we did back in May. So that's surely an indication of the situation with the hunger here in the city. The patients in this program are children younger than 5 years old or pregnant and lactating women. So we are not able to cover everyone, but we covered, let's say, the most vulnerable groups. So even this number we now have 1,600 patients in this cohort. It's only a percentage, of course, of the overall need. Another activity we have is we run a short stay unit, as we call it, which is a small tent hospital, only 13 beds, so very, very small here, because we work right across around the corner from Al-Shifa Hospital, which is the main remaining hospital in Gaza City. They are completely overwhelmed. They have a bed occupancy rate of between 150, sometimes up to 300%. So absolutely no space for patients. And the aim of our activity is actually, when they have patients who still need hospitalization, but they are a little bit more stable, they can come to us, and like that, they make space available for the more acute cases that they are receiving on a daily basis with the mass casualty incidents. And then the last activity we have is we support the emergency room of a primary healthcare center that is actually run by the Ministry of Health, but we provide support in the northwest of the city. And so, yeah, we provide technical support, and we're able, when we can, we try to support a little bit with supplies as well. Very particular difficulty that this place is facing at the moment is that they receive a lot of so-called mass casualty incidents. So moments where many wounded arrive at the same time from the border area Zikim, so in the north of the Gaza Strip, where the aid trucks are entering, and where we see major incidents every single day of people being shot at, people being hit by the trucks, etc.
This definitely seems like you have a variety of direct experiences. Back in, I believe, December, the Doctors Without Borders determined that it was also time for them to assess these experiences and publish them in a report that was concluding that, in fact, what Israel is conducting in the Gaza Strip is genocide. what motivated Doctors Without Borders to make that assessment, to make that determination, and what made the Doctors Without Borders confident that you had the evidence not only to prove mass casualties, but also genocidal intent?
Yeah. So to be very clear, the word genocide, it's not a word that we use lightly in MSF, not at all. But we believe, based on our first-hand experience here in Gaza, we do believe we can use the word, as it is also supported by many other academics and human rights organizations. Of course, we are not a legal organization, but we can say what we see. And what we see here is a population that is deprived of food, both because of the blockade of food. So between March and May, absolutely zero food entered at all. No trucks were entering. Since May, there are some trucks entering, but absolutely not enough to cover the needs of the people. And on top of the lack of access, there is also the fact, and as we published also in an additional report only last week, that on a daily basis, people are being shot and killed at the distribution sites where they try to get aid. And this is really of a cynicism and a cruelty that as MSF, who we exist over 50 years and we work everywhere in the world, we have never seen this ever anywhere. The scale at which people are being attacked when they try to get food. And of course, it's come to a point where people are so desperate to get food that they will go to these sites, even if they know very well that they have the risk to get shot, to get injured, to get killed. But if your family has not eaten in days or in weeks, this is unfortunately the choice that families are having to make. So there's the deprivation of food, there's the deprivation of water as well. So there's not enough drinking water for the people here in Gaza. So more than 90% of people in the Gaza Strip do not have sufficient access to water. Almost everybody relies on the water trucking. And because of the insufficient access to fuel, what we have seen happening is that actually the water desalination plants, they cannot run at the capacity that they should be able to run. And so again, it is today announced as the hottest day since 1942. You can imagine how difficult it is for people to get access to drinking water, but also even basic water for hygiene and to cool themselves down. We have seen the relentless attacks on healthcare, the attacks on hospitals, the attacks on healthcare workers. And of course, on top of that, the fact that there are attacks on people, on civilian targets every single day. I mean, it's you may have heard, even as we speak in the background, I hear strikes all the time. In terms of destruction, the western part of Gaza City is reported as now 40% destroyed. The eastern part of Gaza City is reported 80% destroyed. And this is an area that is much less touched even than others. In north of us, we are talking about 80 to 100% destruction. And so for us, if you put all of these elements together, this is what makes us feel confident that, yes, in this case, we can use the word genocide, once again, based on what we see, not because we are legal scholars, but based on what we notice with our own eyes and in our patients every day.
Just in follow-up to that, based on what you see, what would you tell our viewers who see the destruction, see the mass casualties and are appalled by them, but believe they could be a byproduct of war? How would you argue that this is, in fact, deliberate on Israel's part?
Yeah. Again, I think the scale of what we see can only be described as deliberate. And this is, for example, again, what we see at these aid distribution sites. Again, it's something we have never seen anywhere as MSF. People being targeted every single day in places where they are invited to come because they are hungry and they are invited to come there to take food. And what we see is really, it's like an orchestrated chaos. Because of course people have been allowed to get so hungry. For example, if you make the comparison with what is happening in the north, so closer where I am, in the north there are no distribution sites, but there are trucks that enter every single day. Also there are mass casualty incidents because desperate people, they go towards the trucks and they get shot at by the Israeli army. And of course, if people were not so hungry, they would not take this risk of going there. But so it's like everything somehow is indeed the way we see it, deliberately organized for people to get to this level of desperation, that they are now exposing themselves more than they would if they wouldn't be as hungry. I mean, also let's not forget, it's Israel guards the gates and the borders of the Gaza Strip. It is the Israeli authorities who can decide to let more aid enter, and they have not decided to do that. They are the ones who have decided to keep food out. So you can talk about, let's say, military objectives, but how can it ever be a military objective to starve a civilian population?
I would ask you just a bit more about this food distribution or aid distribution system. Indeed, your report on that is titled Orchestrated Killing, and your emergency coordinator, Mr. Aitor Zabelgoez-Gakora, has also described it as something where they cannot think of anything else than that the infrastructure and the system of how the aid is distributed is by design dangerous and designed in order to facilitate the killing of these people. So could you give examples?
One key point on a more macro level when we talk about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is, of course, the fact that this is humanitarian aid organized by one of the parties of the conflict, in this case, Israel, with the support of the United States. So when it comes to the concept and the principles of humanitarian aid, this is completely counter to the idea that humanitarian aid is delivered in a neutral way by a neutral party. And this is why we are calling, for example, for the UN to be allowed again to do their job and to be able to bring in sufficient aid, because even if these sites would be very well organized, the issue of the lack of neutrality remains. And I think this is indeed what we see. We see these sites used not for humanitarian aid, but used as a weapon against the population, because indeed, so just to be very clear, the project where I work is in Gaza City. I am not the one dealing with these patients directly, because the sites are in the south of the Gaza Strip. So it's my colleagues in the south who are seeing these patients. But so indeed, they have analyzed the data for a period of only 7 weeks. And so in those 7 weeks, they have received 1,380 patients who came from those sites with gunshot wounds, 28 of them dead on arrival. What is key to understand as well is that these numbers, they're the tip of the iceberg, because the 2 health centers that we are talking about, they are primary healthcare centers, and they are not the first place that these wounded people would go to. There is a very big Red Cross hospital nearby. There is Nasser hospital nearby as well. So for sure, my colleagues have not seen the most seriously injured in many cases, and they have not seen the majority of cases. But the reason why we chose to talk about this is because the nature of what we see is so serious. They see, and what was interesting is it's 2 different clinics who report on this. The injuries that they see in both clinics are slightly different. In one of the clinics, so from one of the sites, the majority of people arriving, they had been shot in the legs. While in the other one, they see a much higher percentage of people shot in the chest and in the head. Soldiers know how to shoot. And I think this is really something to keep in mind when we receive a 14-year-old boy who has been shot in the chest. These things cannot be a coincidence, and they cannot be a coincidence when we have seen 1,300 patients like this. This is not a stray bullet that went somewhere. When this happens, very often our colleagues, they receive many patients all at the same time with similar injuries. Based on the stories that the patients tell us and on the injuries that we see, this cannot be classified as a collateral damage, or this cannot be classified as, as I said, a stray bullet. That cannot explain the volume of the injuries that we see and the severity of the injuries that we see. I spoke a few days ago to a patient that we have here in our clinic in Gaza City. So he was not at the site in the south, but at the site in the north. He managed to take half a bag of flour that he split with somebody else who was there. And as he was walking away, he was shot in the back and in the arm. And the shot in his arm with an explosive bullet was so serious that his arm had to be amputated. And these are the risks that people take. When I asked him, why did you choose to go to this site? He explained to me, I have 2 children. They are 1 year old and 3 years old. It had been 2 weeks that the only food that I could give them was a few spoonfuls of soup per day. I would never have gone to that site if my children had not been so hungry, because he knew the risk that he was taking. And so he came home not with a bag of flour, but missing an arm. Like, that's the reality that people here unfortunately have to live.
And does this mean that people choose not to go to the sites and not receive even the food that would be available for fear for their lives?
Certainly. I mean, this is definitely something I hear also from my colleagues here. And even it's the same thing with the airdrops that have been happening that unfortunately are also dangerous. There have been several deaths recorded of the airdrops falling on people, falling on tents. People have been both injured and killed. They get injured not only when the package falls, because there is less than 20% left of the Gaza Strip where people are allowed to live. So it's extremely, extremely overcrowded. So when the packages fall there's a high risk that they fall on someone. The alternative is that the packages fall in the so-called evacuated red zone, where if people go there to take them, they will be shot at also by the Israeli army. But we also see injuries because there is total chaos when these things fall, because people are so hungry that dozens or hundreds of people will go there trying to grab something. And of course, people get crushed, people get injured in the chaos that happens after. And certainly I have even my own colleagues who tell me I am not going to the distribution sites and I am not going towards these aid drops because it's too dangerous. And yes, my family is hungry, but I don't want to take the risk of getting injured or killed at these sites.
Israel's argument for setting up the GHF was that under the UN-operated system, where there were 400 aid sites as opposed to 4 now, but they arguing that in that system, Hamas were stealing the food, and that even now the reason there is starvation is because Hamas are still trying to steal the food. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So we have indeed heard this accusation again and again. I am not at the sites where those distributions are happening. I know that amongst others, the United States Aid Agency has looked into it and has published that there is no evidence for the fact that Hamas was stealing aid at a large scale. For sure, what I can say is that before the 7th of October, there was a need to feed the people of Gaza. There was a need for 500 to 600 trucks to enter every day for people to have sufficient food. What is happening now is around 100 trucks can enter. So there is for sure purely a lack of food that is entering, even regardless of, because we know for sure there are criminal gangs also at the border who are stealing some of the aid. This, we know it is happening. On top, as I was mentioning before, there are desperate people trying to take the aid, like just for their families. So not in big numbers, but they are desperate. So they go towards the truck and they take what they can. But there is also simply not enough entering. So for me, the question of whether it has been systematically stolen by Hamas, we are not the ones to investigate this. I can only say that even an ally of Israel, the United States, has published that there is no proof. I think we certainly have questions around that.
On a very final note, and I really appreciate your time, what would be the most important thing that would need to happen or to change in order for at least Doctors Without Borders to be able to continue your operation on the field? Because we are hearing that you're also running out of some supplies that are required for the medical aid that you're providing.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, we call desperately for 2 things. One is an immediate sustained ceasefire, because we need the attacks to stop, also to receive less injured patients. This would already relieve a little bit the extreme pressure on the health system. And what we need as well is unimpeded access of humanitarian aid, whether food or medical supplies, under the coordination of the United Nations. And I would say even that the access to food it is extremely important also for our medical work, because once again, we have more and more malnutrition patients, but also for other patients, they are not healing the way they should because they don't have enough access to food. The people who have burns, the people who have orthopedic injuries, the body cannot heal if you're not eating sufficient food and quality food. So yeah, these are the key things we call for.
Caroline Willemen, project coordinator for Doctors Without Borders. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thanks for paying attention to it. Have a good day.